What up, my creche? It's me, Fresh. Last time, if you remember, I ended up speaking about my top 10 Pokemon from Generation 3. Well, here it is. The big one. Everyone's favorite generation, Generation 4. This is perhaps one of the greatest generations of Pokemon's history. The amount of movies, games, and anime episodes made of this generation is astounding. To the point where everyone said, just stop making Pokemon things altogether. I have experienced Generation 4 and nothing in life will ever be better. And as a result, the Pokemon introduced in this generation are some of the most iconic. Not only do we have some fresh new faces, but we also have some brand new evolutions. The amount of new evolutions in this generation is astounding. Some of them are great, some of them not so great, but regardless, the amount made is astonishing. All I can say is that this list is going to be pretty interesting. So, here we go. This is my top 10 Pokemon of Generation 4. Number 10. Mothim. You might be surprised to hear that I don't actually have a lot of favorites from Generation 4. I don't know, something about the new evolutions just didn't exactly click to me when I was younger, so it wasn't as impactful to me as it was to other people of my generation. So as a result of the few Pokemon I have from Generation 4, Mothim is kinda scraping the bottom of the barrel. Its name comes from moth and him. Yes, that's his pronouns. I don't know why I like Mothim. There's just something about its orange and yellow coloring that just appealed to me when I was a kid. Mothim is based on bagworm moths, and also Death's Head hawk moths, groups of moths who search for honey at night. Like I've mentioned before, I like Pokemon with multiple evolutions, so naturally, Burmy becoming Mothim and Wormadam was pretty fascinating. Outside of its unique design, it's not really all that special. The reason why I like it so much is because it had a unique story arc in the anime. It loves honey, and it steals from comb bees. It doesn't make a nest, it always looks for honey, scattering scales when flapping its wings. And that's all I have to say. I had to include Mothim on here at some point, so what better spot for him at number 10? Decent Pokemon, decent design. Moving on. Number 9. Glaceon. Yeah, I know. Anyone who knows me knows that Glaceon was probably going to be on this list. I mean, an Ice-type evolution? Of course I'm going to love it. Its name comes from glacier and eon. Glaceon was one of the first Pokemon to spark my love of ice types. There's a lot of diamonds with Glaceon's form, and this would make sense considering that it's partly based on ice crystals. Now, I'm aware that ice types are not the best in terms of fighters in terms of Pokemon, but I love ice and snow, so sue me. It can freeze its body temperature to minus 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Freezing its fur makes its fur as sharp as needles, which it then launches at will. It can freeze the atmosphere around it to make a diamond dust flurry. Humans have used Glaceon in the past to create skiing slopes. Anyone captivated by its snowfall will be frozen before they know it. So yeah, cute but deadly. Not just a friendly face. Number 8. Mamoswine. I've talked about him briefly before, but now I can talk about him officially. Its name is based off mammoth and swine. Obviously based on woolly mammoths and wild boars. If your Piloswine learns ancient power as it levels up, it will become a Mamoswine. With this new evolution, its base stats increase by 80 points, going from 450 to 530. I love Mamoswine because of how big it is. In terms of elephant-sized Pokemon, this one is pretty darn close. Just look at this guy. He is a bulldozer. Maybe that's why I like using him in Pokemon Unite. Its huge tusks are made of ice. Their numbers have plummeted after the last ice age. A frozen one from 10,000 years ago was dug up and came back to life when it was thawed out. It can be spotted on ancient cave paintings. As the weather gets colder, its tusks grow bigger and thicker. The only downside I have for Mamoswine, unfortunately again, is to do with its typing. Ice and ground is a pretty bad type combination. Sure, it's strong against poison types, immune to electric, and weak to literally everything else. No wonder they nearly went extinct. Number 7. Chatot. This guy has a fairly simple design. I mean, it's a parrot with a music note for a head. There's just something so clever about that idea. Its name comes from chat and parrot. It's most likely based off the masked lovebird, but also on the blue and yellow macaw. Its ability Chatter copies audio spoken into the DS microphones. As you would expect, this was abused and later removed in all future games. Its abilities now, as a result, are either Keen Eye, Tangled Feet, or Big Pecs. Chatot is just a funny concept in film, TV, and games. In the TV show, it was used as a comedy act. In the Manaphy movie, it was literally on the shoulder of the main pirate villain. And in terms of the games, well, I'm more of aware of the Chatot in Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Sky, but he's not really that well represented in that game. I always saw him as a bit of a snob. It can learn and speak words due to its human-shaped tongue. Groups of Chatot can all learn the same words. Its tail keeps rhythm like a metronome. It can also mimic other Pokemon sounds to avoid conflict and detection. The older it grows, they can even learn the meaning of the words they learn. Maybe this is why they don't have the ability Chatter anymore, because they learned what some of the swear words they were saying meant. Number 6. Leafeon. Ooh, what a surpriser! The grass type is rated higher than the ice type evolution. Well, there's an interesting reason for that. Leafeon and Glaceon were both revealed at the same time, and if they were revealed today, choosing between the two of them as a favorite would have been a nightmare. However, because they were released when I was a child who preferred grass types, I think it's pretty obvious which evolution became my favorite. As you can probably already tell, not only is Leafeon my favorite evolution of this generation, but it's also my all-time favorite evolution. Its name comes from Leaf and Eon. I used one a lot in Pokemon Battle Revolution. I used to annoy everyone who went up against Leafeon because it knew Grass Whistle. So you can imagine how many times I've put opponents to sleep and then taken them out. It uses photosynthesis to feed while it sleeps. It produces clean air. It doesn't fight, but it will sharpen its leaves into blades to protect its friends, sharp enough to slice through full-grown trees. Leafeon is more in composition to a plant than an animal. As a result of its photosynthesis, it doesn't even need to eat food. Young ones smell like fresh grass, while older ones smell like fallen leaves. It lives in forests near clean rivers. Galar people use this aroma as perfume. Okay, people of my home Pokemon Nation, you do you. Just don't cut the leaves off my Leafeon, please. Number 5. Hippowdon. Just look at this guy. This is a scary sight. Its name comes from hippo, powder, and don, which also happens to be the Greek word for tooth. Hippowdon is obviously based on hippos, but what makes it unique is its theme. Similar to Garchomp, who's partly based on sharks, it's a water creature which is now specialized to swim in sand. Maybe Hippowdon's based on the mythical Bahamut. Some accounts say it supports a bed of sand and may have had the head of a hippo. Not only is it tough looking, but it's really cool. Its abilities produce sandstorms in battle. Hippowdon is such an intimidating sight. Not only do its sprites and artworks look like it's coming out of the ground like a zombie, But think about this. Most hippos can travel through the water at top speeds of 20 miles an hour. That's way, way faster than a human. You can never outpace a hippo. And if you thought that was bad, hippos on land can run at 30 miles an hour. Now, imagine these things tunneling through the ground at the same speed. You'd be dead before you could turn around and see what hit you. It stores sand in the ports in its body to create a tall twister to attack. Its mouth is almost 7 feet wide, tough enough to crush a car. Most hippos' mouths are only 4 feet wide. It gets angry very fast, and it shows its wide mouth as a show of strength. Stones can get stuck in its ports, so they look after Dwebble, who helped to remove them. It swallows sand for storage. That cannot taste great at all. Number 4. Magnezone. Now that is an evolution to Magnemite. Its name comes from magnetic and zone. This is what an evolution should do. Take something cool and make it even cooler. Because I have a hard time liking Magneton as an evolution to Magnemite. I mean, yeah, sure, I get the idea that it's a bunch of Magnemites stuck together because of their magnetism, but at the same time, it's just a bunch of Magnemites stuck together. Nothing changes about them. Magnezone, on the other hand, is a complete departure from Magneton. Just look at this thing. It appears to be based off magnets and UFOs. With its new boosted base stats, along with its incredible type combo, this is one heck of a Pokemon to use in battle. It's immune to poison types, and only weak to 6 types out of 18. So much so that I eventually had to use one. It evolved due to exposure to a strong magnetic field, fusing Magneton into Magnezone. A group of scientists tried to evolve Magnezone, but their efforts failed. Idiots. Unless you are trying to mega evolve it, which I'm all for, there's no way a Pokemon's evolution line would have 4 representatives in one line. Their magnetism is so strong that groups of them become stuck together and can't move. It's been mistaken for UFOs as it flies through the sky. Not only does it look like a UFO, but there's some otherworldly elements to Magnezone that make it even more mysterious. It receives signals through its antenna, and it sends those signals back to an unknown source. People believe that it came from space, and that it's being controlled by some mysterious being. Ooh. Number 3. Lucario. Yeah, everyone's gonna say the same thing. Lucario's gonna be on everyone's top 10 lists. Lucario is a fan favorite that grew on me, thanks to Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Sky. Because the game chose me to be a Riolu, and Riolu evolves into Lucario. Its name is a reverse transcription of Orichalcum, a mythical Atlantean metal with magical properties. Lucario made his debut in the 8th Pokemon movie, Lucario and the Mystery of Mew, one of the greatest Pokemon movies to date. And ever since then, he's been rocking it out ever since. Lucario is most likely based off Anubis, the jackal-headed Egyptian god of the dead. That makes sense why it knows the move Bone Rush. Its steel fighting type has incredible balance. Despite its strength, Lucario is only about 4 feet 10 inches tall. It can sense the auras of all living things, even if half a mile away or invisible. It can understand human speech. It uses and controls aura to read thoughts and movements, and doing this helps it battle. It can hunt their prey in packs. Its aura can crush boulders to dust. Lucario often finds out things it doesn't need to know when reading minds, stressing it out easily. Ugh, whose minds have they been reading? As a result, it only trusts people who have justice in their hearts. Lucario's Mega Evolution is also pretty unique. According to lore, it's the first Mega Evolution that was ever used and discovered. The black streaks on its Mega form show where the aura is flowing, making it a heartless fighter. And in the anime, that's all too true. Lucario is just so popular. It became a fighter in Super Smash Bros. And in the Pokemon Sword and Shield anime. After 4 generations, Ash finally evolved a Riolu into a Lucario, and it can Mega Evolve. Think about that. A Pokemon that became so popular now being used by the protagonist of the show. Now that is awesome. Number 2. Frostlass. This branched evolution to Snorunt pulls a complete 180, just like Magikarp and Gyarados. Snorunt, the hat Pokemon, originally just evolved into Glalie, the face Pokemon? Boring. However, after Generation 4, all you need to do is give a Dawnstone to a female Snorunt and you get this spooky beauty. Its name comes from Frost and Lass. Frostlass is primarily based off the Yuki Onna, the mythical kimono-wearing snow woman of Japanese folklore. Frostlass is a trickster in battle. Its ghost ice typing make it immune to normal and fighting type moves. It's stronger against more foes than any Snorunt or Glalie can handle. The Frostlass I used in Pokemon Sun and Moon could learn all sorts of status moves. It can of course freeze its foes and cause frostbite, but that's not all. Rain Dance can cause rain to weaken fire types, it can learn Thunderbolt to paralyze its opponents, it can confuse, sap health, it can even learn Will-O-Wisp that causes burns. Yes, that's right, an ice type that causes burns. Frostlass couldn't be traded back in Pokemon Black and White because its name contains a dirty word. I bet you can figure that one out for yourself. It's a very versatile fighter. It freezes foes with its icy breath at nearly minus 60 degrees Fahrenheit. It supposedly displays its frozen prey in its den, whether they be people or Pokemon. Now that is sadistic. Its body is actually hollow. Legend says that a woman with a grudge got lost on an icy mountain and was reborn as this Pokemon. It craves the frozen souls of handsome men. It often goes hunting in human settlements on nights of terrible blizzards, going door to door. It places curses on misbehaving men. Good for you, Frostlass. Good for you. I was very close to putting Frostlass at number 1, but for nostalgia's sake, number 1 could only go to one Pokemon in particular. But before we get to number 1, I'd like to have an honorable mention. Rotom. Now before everybody leaves a bunch of hate comments, let me just tell you that I don't actually hate Rotom. In fact, I love Rotom. It's an electric ghost type that has the power to possess any electronic devices and use it in battle. Not only do its appearances change, but its type changes as well. Out of the different forms it can assume, my top 2 favorites are Fan Rotom, which is an electric flying type, and Mow Rotom, which is an electric grass type. All in all, Rotom is a great Pokemon, but the reason I didn't put it on the list is because getting one on your team is really hard. Seriously, in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, the only way you can get the only Rotom in the game was to beat the game and find it in the old chateau. In Pokemon Black and White, you couldn't get one unless you transferred one over from your previous games. And in all future games, you either need to wait very late into the game to get one, or complete the game altogether and then it will become available. That's not fair. If Rotom was a little easier to catch, I probably would have put it on the list somewhere between 4 and 5. But because getting them is pretty hard, and by the points in the game you actually find them, your team is more or less complete. So putting a Rotom on your team at that point is kinda pointless. Not to mention that as time progresses and technology advances, you basically travel the game with a Rotom. In Pokemon Sun and Moon, your Pokédex is possessed by a Rotom. And ever since then, Everything you need is all on your mobile phone, which also is possessed by a Rotom. So, considering the fact that in future games we'll now all be traveling with a Rotom by our side anyway, feeling the need to catch one will be pretty redundant. But if you really want to catch one for your team, go ahead, I'm not going to stop you. I'm just stating what I think. Unless of course they do something new with Rotom in the future, which could happen, but I wouldn't hold out hope for it. So unfortunately Rotom, despite your unique abilities, you'll be in the honorable mention spot. But with all that out of the way, now it's with great pleasure to announce that my number 1 Gen 4 Pokemon is... Torterra. How is this for a starter Pokemon? Its name comes from tortoise and terra, the Latin word for earth. Torterra is also based off of quite a number of places. It's based off snapping turtles and the Ankylosaurus. It also appears to be based off the world turtle, just like Lapras, legends of the world being carried on the back of a giant turtle. Being a grass ground type, Torterra is one of the toughest fully evolved starter Pokemon of all time. It's very strong, and as a result, it can learn all sorts of strong moves, like Hyper Beam, Wood Hammer, Earthquake, Frenzy Plant, and even more. Not only is Torterra my strongest starter Pokemon, but it is also my all-time favorite starter Pokemon. You see, back when I first played Pokemon Diamond, I started off with Turtwig, but from that point on, I had no idea what to expect. I had no idea what Turtwig was going to evolve into, so once it evolved into Grotle, I had a feeling it was going to become something extraordinary. And by the time it evolved into Torterra, my wishes were granted, and it looked just as spectacular. Torterra can be so big that smaller Pokemon feed on it and make their homes on its backs. Some Pokemon are born on Torterra's back and never leave. Torterra has been mistaken for moving forests. They roam the earth in its eternal search for clean water. There are legends that say that Torterra grew to gigantic sizes and that we all live on the back of a giant Torterra. And in the Detective Pikachu movie, that fact is more or less confirmed, because there are gigantic Torterra that we could all be living on right now. Torterra just conveys incredible size, strength, and power. So therefore, not only is it my all-time favorite starter Pokemon, but because of that, it deserves to be my number 1 Gen 4 Pokemon. Well folks, that's it. My top 10 Gen 4 Pokemon. Join me next time where I dive into Generation 5, often considered to be one of the weakest of the Pokemon generations to date, but even in a generation like this, it can still surprise you. And as a result, there's a lot of Pokemon to cover from this generation. So, until next time, stay fresh, and thank you for watching.